And we're live. Another Austro Thomism Roundtable. We got Belkov, we got Eincast. Fellas, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Fantastic. How are you, Caleb?
I'm busy. That's what I'm doing. I'm busy. I'm taking the entire month of September off from Twitter and podcasting just so I can read these like 5 books we're gonna cover.
Your library looks a little fuller behind you.
Well, I moved books to the top shelf because I keep grabbing Aristotle as like a sight book, and so I keep down low. And in the amount of times I see people tweet like dumb, like starvation stuff, I'm like, no, I gotta go swords in me aching to fix that. So this is a fun one. This is a Thomistic book on love and ecstasy, which has been a lot of fun to read. But
yeah, I need to read that book too, just to compare it to.
I also just noticed I have 4 library books over here. I forgot to return. Wait, they were due 13 days ago. That's fantastic.
The elites don't want you to know this, but the books at the library are free. I have 458 books from the library at home.
I wish that was true. I could just go get a whole bunch of books and never go back. I pay taxes. They're basically mine anyway.
Just before you move out, you move to a different city. Just before, like, a week before you check out, like, the whole library.
Get a book on Hitler. Get a book everywhere. Keep going around. Never return them. I am the only guy. I am the only person who uses the Bartow Library for anything related to books. Everyone else uses it like on the computers or in the bathrooms. That's all it's used for by homeless people.
That's God intended, I think.
I think that's
the classic library.
Yeah,
the classic public library in most modern nations, I think.
Random tangent. What is the status of like libraries in Brazil? Because you hear all these things about the United States having like this really big public library system and being this big innovation. Is that do you have like public libraries a thing in Brazil for the most part?
Private libraries. I'm not even joking. So I have no clue. Private libraries are pretty good. Bookstores also, versus bookstore chains which have libraries and stuff like that, and I usually go to those. Those are really, really good. And they're like inside shopping malls, and they're usually like well frequented, and people are buying books. And there's a cafe outside run by the bookstore, and it's gigantic. I mean, I went the other day and I got 2 Haruki Murakami books in English because I prefer the translations in English. So it's great. It was right by the entrance too, which was lucky for me. I didn't need to look far for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, the libraries in my area suck.
But I don't think the public libraries here are good. I will caveat it with that just by looking at most of our other public services.
I once spent 2 hours in the biggest library in the county trying to find one philosophy book. I found a Sam Harris book. That was the closest I could find.
Oh man!
So no real philosophy is what you're saying.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
They had a dummies guide for a philosophy class. That was about it.
Nice.
Interesting.
We're saying when the manga section is like when the manga section of the library is bigger than like the literature section, the coach is doomed. Right there. That's my barometer. If I can't find Shakespeare, if I can find No Game No Life Volume 2 or some shit, society's over. It's done.
Why would you buy manga? You have a phone. Just like go online. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Like there's like 5 good mangas in the world, and like one of them is Berserk. I don't know what the other 4 are. Like I guess Chainsaw Man. I don't know. I mean, like you have your phone. You don't need to buy it. Like it's fine. And Miura Kentaro's dead. The guy who did Berserk is dead. So you really don't need to buy it. It's fine. You can just pirate it.
That's my rule now. Whenever someone's dead, I have no need to buy anything of theirs. Just steal it. I'm not going to get the money anyway, so what's the matter?
But we also have very good news. We have Shia LaBeouf converting to Catholicism.
Dubbed in the chat, boys. Dubbed in the chat.
Yeah, that was actually I did not have that on my 2022 bingo card.
Nope, I forgot who he was honestly. Unless I see a Transformers meme, I forget he exists.
See, I think I know him more from like the random like cringe libtard stuff, like the he will not divide.
Yeah, no, I followed that closely because that was really fucking funny.
I forgot about
it. Was amazing.
I mean, that was really funny. That's still funny. I love Shia now. That's still really funny.
Didn't Steven Crowder go to like Shia LaBeouf's like live stream and do a soda at one point?
I don't think it was Crowder. Crowder wasn't a big thing back then. There were several. Sam Hyde went there. He didn't do a show, but he went there because Sam Hyde is everywhere. There was like other people. There was a lot of crazy stuff because it was like a 24/7 live feed, and it wasn't really guarded, and it moved location like 6 times.
Yeah, I found it.
And
He did it.
people always managed to screw it over on purpose because it was just funny.
It was
Like-
Crowder hijacked Silo Buff stream. Dean Kane as guest. What a weird.
That
thing
must
to
not
read.
have been funny because I don't remember it.
Was
That's
Crowder
what I
ever
assume.
funny?
Yeah, it's Crowder. I assume it wasn't funny.
Harsh. Yeah,
No,
remember I think
apparently
Gavin
Shia
McGinnis
LaBeouf-
did it, trolled it at some point.
Yeah, well, McGinnis.
Gavin might. That seems like something Gavin would do.
I love Gavin. I miss him so much.
I haven't watched him in years.
Apparently he's in prison right now. Have you guys heard about that?
Oh, I heard that he disappeared.
Wait, what,
I think there was. I haven't gotten any confirmation, but I think there was some word that like apparently he's actually been. I think he's just like being held right now. But apparently his involvement in something. Yeah, he's in
He was
custody.
interrupted by law enforcement on live show about like
What?
10 hours, like hours and hours ago, and we haven't really heard from him since. Was the last I heard.
I think I got confirmation from someone on his staff that like he's been taken into custody.
Oh wow.
Wow. I gotta say, all the right wing people, and the fact that he's the only one to really get arrested, shows how great he is.
And another Catholic, always important.
Oh, he is. I didn't
He's
know
Catholic.
Oh God,
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, another dub. We stay winning over here, guys. We're just finding people like Kevin James Catholic dub.
Yeah,
move.
he's not even like a convert or anything. He was racist, but like, yeah, that's a W. We just found it out. Whatever.
All blah in heaven, guys. Let's go.
But yeah, I guess that is
like when he
some
gets
bad
wings.
news to take the good news. Gavin, we got a new Catholic convert and the Catholic in jail. Well, that actually sounds very much like most of Catholic history. So that's fine. That's as expected.
You know, where wedding was like, yeah, one of us got put into prison for his faith, so we just continue to win. Another martyr for the cause.
Martyr for the cause.
Exactly.
Always a victory. Always a victory.
Yeah. Well, I guess McKinnon was in praying for martyrdom. I don't know. That's always a possibility. God decided to grant his prayers. Live on air, so that no one could doubt him too.
Baller. Wonder if he got like a heads up and set up a show. I can see that. See, yeah, was the kind of guy. If he found out, he said, "They're coming now. Get the camera on. Let's do a live show."
Yeah.
That's gotta be baller.
I mean, I don't know how often he does it. I wonder if law enforcement timed it. I don't know. That seems like a thing they might do if they're asshole enough.
As much as I hate Tim Pool, I want to see Gavin McGinnis go on Tim Pool because I know Tim would try to get him to stop talking every few sentences because Gavin's just missing out on YouTube. And I think that would just be a lot of fun.
That probably would be fun.
Tim Pool is just I don't know why anybody watches Tim Pool. He's just the worst. But the only time he's funny is when there's a guest on. I want to say somebody has to set him up. That's the only time he's in.
The reason people watch Tim Pool and why I watched Timcast for like a few months is because he's a good news aggregator. I got to give him that. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to read fucking international newspapers like that. I'll just go to Timcast, drop it for like an hour and then leave. It's like, whatever. Like whatever the important news of the day are probably being talked about there. Or probably mentioned at least. So like, oh, I'll look this up. The conversation is uninteresting, but the news is interesting, so I'll go look it up. Or see what people who I find interesting have something to say about it.
I get most of my news from the titles of his episodes. That's what I get most of my news nowadays. It's like, oh, damn, someone got arrested? Okay, I just move on. I really don't care anymore. It's so boring.
I get most of my international news from a timeline. I mean, I would not have known Biden pardoned some fucking student loans or whatever. I still don't know what he did if the timeline wasn't talking about it. I still don't know what he did because I don't really care because I'm not American, so it's not my president. But still, I would not have known about it at all.
I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing because it's true for me as well that like my source of news is the timeline.
Yeah.
And like I think it's probably like if you curate decently well, I don't think it's the worst like just source of like this happened. But it feels really weird because if I'm not following one that cares about it, it didn't exist.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, very much so. I mean, yeah, I don't curate it well at all. Like I could if I wanted to. There's like a few people I follow who probably have like, oh, this guy's like Mr. Prudentialist. He's very good at geopolitics. Like if I wanted to follow his blog, if I wanted to know what's happening in South Africa, I think Robert Dugan, he's really good on his Substack. There's like people I could follow and check their Substack like every weekend or, like spend 30 minutes just like going through the titles of their Substack stuff if I really wanted to, but I don't. I just like go on Twitter and like if they tweet something, they tweet it and it gets on my timeline. If it gets on my timeline, That's it. That's my curation process. I follow people and then see what happens.
Eincast, we got a question for you from Grant.
Oh
He
no.
said, at Austro Thomism, ask at Eincast on air why he avoided Zammy and I. Is he afraid of our power?
Oh, terrified. Absolutely terrified. It's well, no. So I've just tried to build this troll as much as possible because my goal is when I actually get to talk, particularly to Grant, is I want to see if I can just give him an aneurysm on air. Is just throw every single possible thing that I know will trigger him at once, and just like scanner style, just watch his head explode. That's the goal, and I don't think I wasn't quite ready yet. Like I had to do like the Dragon Ball Z thing and go back and like train
you have
and
to
like
do
go in like
the training. You have to do I forget the time compression thing. Train more. Every other word. Whenever Grant is speaking, you just mutter Rothbard and quietly.
It's like, well, if you read Bastiat.
Grant is fun, but he's so much fun to troll. It's so easy.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best.
This comedy to what economics and he's like blowing a gasket.
Well, if you understood marginal utility, then you would agree with me.
I mean, it's true though. Like, there's like, I'm gonna go on a rant here real quick. Is like, I love those guys, but like, if they just had that little bit of like the good part of Austrian economic theory, things would fall into place so much more clearly. And it's just like I wanted to shake them. It's like, you guys are so smart. Just like read this. I know you'll hate half of it, but the other half is really good.
Yes.
This one, this is the only book I should read. Ethics of Money Production by Hughes Mann. The lighting is not letting me say it well.
Have you read it? What does it talk about? I don't know. Like, I assume it talks about the ethics of money production, but does it actually get into like the nitty gritty of economics?
It's like 2 whole chapters on the economic fiat money effects on the family and on culture, and like the spiritual effects of it. And he talks about how like if you have the effect printing money through fiat printing of money has on savings and how it affects family. And he goes into whole like time preference and like economic defense of the family. It's again, like the second half of it's really good. The first half is really kind of just, if you know who likes monetary economics like I do, then it's a pretty fun book. But really, it's the second half that's, I think, important for people to kind of understand the importance of economics and how much it can affect everything else.
Monetary theory is when my brain melts. Like, it's money, finance, and banking. Which is unfortunate because those seem the areas that would make me the most money if I understood. That like my brain is like, nope, okay, we give up. That's it. Like everything else, capital structure, allocation of resources, whatever else, like business cycle. Yep, got it. Money, banking, finance. No, I don't get it. It's brain just like shuts down. Like I get the basics of the theory, but aside from that, it's like, nope, I don't. When you're trying to apply it, nope, I don't. No, get out of here.
It really is like, I trust this author enough. Okay, just give me the what should I conclude from your 100-page analysis of this? What how do we fix this? What's the problem? Let me just I don't care about the details. It's too hard.
Yeah, I review every Bob Murphy lecture. Okay, I don't care. Get to the end. What matters here? I don't need to hear 50 minutes of. Well, here's how they might think of it this way. I don't care. I don't care, Murphy.
Yeah, let's talk about an island where people only produce sushi. Like, let's talk 15 minutes about that. To get to ABC.
The only time he's bailable is when he's doing episodes with Tom Woods and like Contra Krugman, because Tom would like keep it in check, keep it away, which was fantastic. But by himself, I don't know what. I've tried watching his podcast. Like, what was it? He had Sadius Russell on once, and I tried to get through it. It was so. Both of them were just making these terrible arguments against each other. I'm like, both of these are stupid. Like, Bob's arguments against postmodernism is dumb, and postmodernism is dumb, so all of it's just stupid.
I think Bob's a great economist. I don't like him as an ethicist or as a philosopher particularly. But I think he's a great guy. He always sounds like very nice.
He very funny on Twitter.
He is very funny, and he is actually pretty funny.
Yeah. Okay, so we had so Shia LaBeouf. Back to that.
Yes. Did anyone watch the interview?
I watched about half of it. I did not.
I watched all of it. I couldn't move. I was like, no, I'm here until I finish this.
So I haven't gotten around. I've heard fantastic things. Can you give us sort of a rundown?
Really good. It might be my favorite interview of all time. I'm not even joking. And it's that good. I felt like because I really didn't expect this.
So let me play sort of ask the devil's advocate questioning at least a little bit, because I've asked there's a couple of voices have been sort of like doubting how authentic this is. Apparently this is his second time converting to Catholicism. Was I seeing that correctly? Like,
he's technically been baptized, but yes, okay. It's like his second time really kind of participating. But the other time was in like 2014 when, as he admits, he was fucking insane. Like it was more or less just before the "He Will Not Divide Us" stuff, where he was really kind of like losing his fame and kind of crazy, and I think that shows. And he says that he wasn't really catechized, and he only really got properly catechized now, where he spent months and months with Capuchin friars, and they just taught him everything.
So was all of that just part of his preparation for playing Padre Pio, or?
I mean, it started as that, and then it became.
Oh, and
more.
He just stayed. Okay, gotcha.
And then they didn't send him there. He just went there. I was like, because he said like, okay, it was my ego driving me. I was like, okay, this is going to be a movie. It's going to be good for my career. My career is kind of in shambles. And then after the first month, he was like, okay, this is no longer just training. This is just like, okay, I'm becoming Catholic now, basically. And he's really passionate about it. If you see the interview, I mean it opens up, really passionate.
I love how it opens up with Mr. Bear when they talk about like the craft of acting. And I was like, oh, that'd be interesting to hear what he says about acting. And he Silas immediately cuts right back to the math, and he has to be like drawn back into talking about acting.
Yeah,
he's like, I'm an actor. So he jumps to the math. He brings up like he starts him before Mr. Barron does, which is interesting. It's a really fun interview.
Really, really good. I mean, this was very, very interesting to see,
and it's created great memes. Like Catholics finally have a Muslim newscaster meme. We have Shia LaBeouf saying things like "Next Inquisition will be after the Jesuits." Like we have great memes now.
Yeah, that's EWTN, right? Eternal Memory TV, after the infamous Memory TV memes, which are great. But yeah, man, this is a really good interview. Really, really worth your time, because it's someone who's very clearly passionate and is pretty crazy about this. And hearing him talk about Pio and what the people who met Pio told him, like I never knew, because I never looked into Pio, because Padre Pio is not big in Brazil. We have Saint Francis and Mother Mary. That's who those are the two we really like. Everyone else is like, Saint Longinus. We pray to him whenever we lose something or whatever. That's just like cultural stuff. We don't really know Padre Pio, but hearing him talk about how people confirmed that, yeah, Padre Pio just had all-out fist fights with the devil every now and then. Like there were dents and blood in his room. Like his room was broken. His fingers were mashed. Like yeah, that just happened. Like that's just a thing that happened every now and then. And Bishop Barron was like, yeah, we've had mystics do that before. That sounds very real. He just took him very much in stride, obviously, because
I don't know anything about. I know nothing about the saint he's playing. I didn't know who he was until I heard about the Shia LaBeouf interviews. So I'm very excited to watch the movie.
There is another Padre Pio movie which I've downloaded. I should watch, which is from 2001. I've heard it's pretty good.
Austro told me the movie night.
I'm very excited for Shia's performance. But yeah, I think Cato said Cato mentioned this in chat earlier that like I'm no longer worried about Shia playing Padre Pio after this. I'm really not worried at all.
Yeah, it's gonna be there's been a lot of great Catholic movies. We got Father Stew, we got this one coming out. Mark Wahlberg getting more involved in Catholicism, Shia LaBeouf becoming Catholic. We need Mel Gibson to make another Catholic film now. We just need to have.
Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson's like got him into Latin masses. He mentioned that like very en passant, but like it was like I didn't know where Latin masses were, but I'm good friends with Mel Gibson, and so Mel Gibson is like, of course he knows. Yeah. Of course he knows.
That's awesome. I need those three guys to make a movie now, like a very Catholic movie.
That'd be
interesting. It's honestly funny to me that like Mark Wahlberg would play Shia LaBeouf and transform into like the main guy, and then they're both Catholic now. I don't know. I think that's like a funny coincidence.
Was Mark Wahlberg like the main guy in Transformers?
Yeah, he replaced him. Shia LaBeouf did the first three, and then the next two were with Mark Wahlberg.
Michael Bay, secret Catholic confirmed.
Yeah, that's my connection now.
Imagine if that was like Michael Bay is like acting like this very like stereotypically Jewish guy, only hires Jewish people for like the main jobs with the most money.
Like, I think that conversion would shock me more than Shia LaBeouf would.
Yeah, that would also. Yeah, Michael Bay's like actually all Transformers movies are actually very secretly Catholic. If you look, there's like symbolism everywhere, but no one noticed. I just thought it was schlock.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Who would be the biggest surprise? Like, what celebrity would be like the biggest shock you found they became Catholic?
Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Bill Gates. Actually, Bill Gates, I wouldn't believe. So that doesn't.
I wouldn't know. Who would be?
It's like Tony Blair becoming Catholic. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I think for me it'd be The Rock. The Rock would be like the biggest. Like, didn't expect that, but good to know. You know, let's see.
I'm trying to think who it would be like, because it would be some like really like super evangelical prot that like was already very Christian, but like
Joel
you just
What's
know,
his name? What's his name? Oh my god, he does all those Christian films. Oh my god, what's his name?
I know who you're talking about.
Sarbo?
Kevin Sorbo.
No, yeah, that's Hercules. He's great. No, what's his name?
what's he done? Give us some of the movies.
He was in Left Behind. He was in that Growing Pains, Still Growing Up. Growing Pains.
Wait, Left Behind wasn't Nicolas Cage in that?
Yeah, but there's an older one he did.
Oh.
It is gonna bug me if I don't look it up right now. Hold on, I gotta find it. Cook Cameron.
Oh, yeah, Cameron. Yeah,
that's it. Cook Cameron. That'd be the funniest one to me. Him or Leonardo DiCaprio.
Really that would be pretty funny. He's like super prot. He's like super evangelical. I've seen 10 minutes of him, maybe total speaking. He's super evangelical. Like you can get that from him immediately. It's kind of funny.
He goes to a mega church type situation where the guy's like a prosperity preacher. Trent Horn did a great rebuttal to his pastor's video on like going out to Catholic salvation. I can't remember the guy's name. That's gonna bug me if I don't. Okay, I can't remember. I'm not gonna look it up because it bugged me too much. But yeah, there's a lot of things that decide to turn. You know, like Tim Dillon was on Joe Rogan the other day. Like, to be cool now, you have to be Catholic or something. Which is turn around, and when the culture is so much bullshit, people just return to counterculture, which is being Catholic, which is, you know, win.
I mean, even if it initially is just a draw towards the aesthetics, and we should, you know, be humble and accept the mantle as the most aesthetic Christian denomination. In all humility, accept the mantle and responsibility of that fact. And just, you know, like, obviously, if people are looking for meaning, they look for the most stylish people providing meaning first, and then, you know, it becomes a real thing afterwards, if God wills.
But I think it's and sort of brings around to what we'll eventually end up getting onto this evening. But they're like the idea of Catholicism being the counterculture. Like it is hard to get much further away because so much of what we're in now is this sort of, you know, post-liberalism, post-enlightenment, French Revolution, idealist kind of, and like you mentioned, Volga, the aesthetics of the Catholic Church and the reality of the Catholic. It's you can't get much more trad than the Catholic Church, and trad is counterculture right now.
Yeah, no, but I think the Catholic Church has a countercultural spirit in the sense that almost all of its heresies that it condemned were fads of the time. I mean, the asceticism of Manes, the Arianism of Deacon Arius. I mean, when Constantine converted, he and his son was definitely an Arian. He wasn't a Catholic, properly speaking, and Constantine himself was Arian leaning. So even then, like, even the church put itself in opposition to Constantine, even when it accepted his end of persecution. It put itself in opposition to his actual beliefs in Arianism, having condemned it as a heresy. So at almost every moment when it's faced with a heresy, it will at the most surprising moment say, "Nope, we're against that. You're wrong." And it will always never say quite what you expect. I think Chesterton makes this point. It will never say quite what you expect it to say or when you expect it to say it. Yeah, heck, we were the counterculture of Rome for the first few hundred years. Yeah, we're Romans against Rome in a sense. Like we're the Roman Catholic Church, yet we were in open rebellion against the Roman emperors for 300 years, something like that.
Yeah.
No, I think the church is always at its most. I don't know about its strongest, but it's always its most pure self when it's in opposition to the dominant culture.
Oh yeah,
when it's not subject to the whims and fads of the day.
Yeah,
I think I'm trying to find the Chesterton line. Yeah, I'm trying. Let me see if I can find it. It's in Everlasting Man. It shares in all human size. Sharing on its human side all the passions of the age. Yet always at the supreme moment, suddenly rising superior to them, never saying exactly what it was expected to say, and never needing to unsay what it had said. I can find no explanation except that, like Pallas from the brain of Jove, it had indeed come forth out of the mind of God, mature and mighty, and armed for judgment and for war. This is from Everlasting Man, the Witness of the Heretics, which is probably my favorite chapter of the book. It's a really good chapter.
When are we going to when are we going to start covering Chesterton, Caleb? I keep telling you need to do Chesterton on here.
I read the first Father Brown book recently.
When
Nice.
I finish,
yeah. Come on, Caleb, read more.
I'm trying. It's just so many books and audiobooks. It's like I got a complaint at work the other day because the guy was like, "I'm asking all these questions about the job, and you always have your headphones in." I'm like, "Oh, I don't care about this job, dude. I'm trying to do the podcast."
I have a podcast. I have a book to listen to. Shut up.
Like, do you care about this job? This pays like I can't. No, this job is great because I can drive the truck for 4 hours and listen to an audiobook. It's the only benefit.
Perfect Catholic work ethic. Love it.
Stop taking naps in the field. You Protestant bosses always trying to keep the Catholic man down.
Trying to keep the Catholic man down.
Trying to make us work. Rome wasn't built in a day because of the Catholic work ethic.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to a counterculture, the Catholic Church is a fighting church at the end of the day. If it gets too comfortable, it gets uneasy. It doesn't like being too comfortable. It kind of likes having something to struggle against. I mean, it always will at the end of the day. You know, we do have our enemy at the end of the day, even if everyone converted and was a strict Catholic. But whenever the powers of the world are arrayed against it explicitly or even implicitly, or when eventually we get to our best,
it makes the fight easier because it's more obvious who the enemy is.
Yes.
If you have a culture that is nominally Catholic or is leaning in that direction, it's much more difficult to uncover heresy or to root out evil. When the culture is explicitly against you, you can just fight against that. It's much more straightforward.
Yes, very much so. Especially, I don't know, maybe this is a thing of the modern world where the Catholic Church, it always had to play politics, but from what I've read, it didn't exactly play politics the same way. Maybe because, it held sway over men who would raise armies for it. Like barons would just say, yeah, the Catholic Church says this, the king is a heretic. Yeah, let's go kill the king, whatever. Like, yeah, we'll raise the army. And now we don't really have dukes and earls who might be willing to say, yeah, no, the king is wrong. Let's go. He's a heretic. He's rebellious. This other guy who's like his brother is like, he's in strict adherence with God. And even though he might have his problems with the Pope and, maybe he's considering killing the Pope in the future, he's still like a Catholic. He's at least not a heretic. Which is what happened with, I forget which King Louis it was, but in the Avignon papacy, it started because King Louis kind of accidentally killed the Pope because they were having this whole dispute. I forget what it was about. And he sent guys to beat up the Pope while the Pope was visiting his hometown. And the Pope died of his injuries 2 weeks later. So, and then the next Pope died only 1 year later. I know why. Because the Pope was planning to excommunicate the king, and the king was like, no, you're not, and just beat him up, which is an insane power move when I think about it.
Wow.
And then the next Pope was like, no, we're not going to excommunicate you. But he was old, so he died 1 year later. And then the next guy, I think it was Pope Clement V, or he's Clement something. He says, also, we're moving the papal court to France for now because there's the Cathars there, and I want to squash that heresy, and I want to make sure the King of France doesn't break away. And so he did that. And, people say that he kind of conceded, but very rarely. He kind of strong-armed the King of France, partly because he was friends with him before, but he wasn't a subject of France either. He was the southern region of France, of modern France, wasn't under the King of France's purview at the time, and he was personal friends with Louis. So he really managed to strong arm him into a lot of concessions to the Catholic Church without ever having to, threaten to excommunicate him and getting killed for it.
The Popes won politics.
They really did, but I think the system there facilitated it. The modern system, it's nope, there's an absolute authority in these matters, and what they say goes. I think
one of the things that you really see is kind of transition, World War I, World War II, when a lot of countries wanted to get the Allies to stop, they'd go through the papacy. Japan, when they tried to surrender to America, and America wouldn't adhere to the unconditional surrender policy, the Japanese ambassadors to the papacy tried to pursue through paper routes squashing of the war, and they wouldn't hear it.
I think that's actually what the Japanese did at one point.
Yeah.
I mean, when they were losing against the Americans, I remember even like someone sent Roosevelt like a relic, like not a relic, but like something made out of like either the bones or something of Japanese soldiers. And like Roosevelt praised them, and the Japanese envoy in the Vatican was like, "What the fuck?" And Roosevelt then like gave it back, like got it buried with the other Japanese soldiers and sent it back to the homeland. But yeah, that was
the mic. Andrew says the mic isn't working.
Can hear you fine.
I can hear you fine. You're a little gravelly, but you're not echoing, which was the problem every time. So I didn't raise it up.
See here. Okay. How's? Nope, not that one. How's?
Yeah, to your point, Bulgov, I think it's in certainly in the in our lifetimes at least. So I think the last 100 years or so, it seems like in some way the church is sort of like you said, historically very good at playing politics when it needs to. And a lot of times we've already sort of taken a back seat in politics and sort of tried to either be above it or be separate from it. And I think much to the detriment of geopolitics worldwide is that there's it's hard to imagine a conflict being mediated right now by the Vatican. In the way that, like Caleb was mentioning, that people would go through and try and organize ceasefires or surrenders, or that there was a role for the Catholic. There should be a role for the Catholic Church to do those things.
Yeah,
and it doesn't really exist anymore. And I think. To some extent, I think the church sort of ceded ground in that regard. And I think it's very bad for geopolitics to not have that avenue or not have that.
I think it's
presence.
Maybe it's I don't know. I would need to trace the history of it. Certainly, it would be after the Protestant revolt. Let's say I almost said Reformation, but I would need to see the history of it. If it was either something that the state themselves, will take the Hoppian basic view of like, yeah, the king centralized power and removes power from the other aristocrats, and as a process of that, which Hoppe doesn't talk about. As a consequence of that process, he also took away the influence by removing aristocrats. He also removed the influence that the church might have had over those aristocrats and over the people. Therefore, that those aristocrats had influence and control over. By aristocrats, I mean not just like courtiers or whatever. I mean the actual like earls, dukes, whatever, barons, archdukes, whatever. What else would be? I forget all the titles now. Counts, yeah. Counts, dukes, barons, stuff like that at all levels. So by removing that and centralizing power in like one government nowadays, back then it'd be like one figure. I think especially with the advent of the modern state, and I think the modern state can kind of trace back to the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Those would, I think, be the two most earliest approximations I can see of the idea of modern governance, or where the principles of modern governance get taken from. We can say that maybe, I don't know much about American history. Bye, Caleb. I don't know much about American history, but maybe we can say that, it was very, very good at the beginning until like 1820 something, which is, I think, the date, which I usually hear Americans say it all started to go really, really wrong. I don't know why, what happened there, but fine, I'll believe you. I'll take you at your word. You probably know your stuff better than I do. And the French Revolution was, as we all know, an immediate disaster. And I think everyone was like, yeah, I want that disaster here too. and I don't know how much influence the church could have had in stopping it. It's outside of maybe calling a crusade. That's kind of what I imagine they maybe could have done that would have had that effect. But even then, by that point, Protestantism had already spread enough to really disarm whatever calls for a crusade might have, whatever the results of calls for a crusade might have gotten.
I do love the idea of calling a modern crusade, especially because the Catholic diaspora is sort of everywhere. A crusade 1,000 years ago, I mean, okay, basically like Europe is going to go do X.
Yes.
Now it would be so just sort of you would have crusaders already in every community in every country in the world. And I think it would be very interesting to see what would happen if there was this, not, it doesn't have to be a bloody conflict, but if there was just a call to like, no, Catholics need to do this to fix the modern world. What action would look like, just because we're everywhere.
And Andrew has in the chat has mentioned that Francis has actually been trying to mediate, and I know, but as the next one points out, the Russian patriarch canceled a public meeting with Francis. I don't think that would have happened in like 1450. Like maybe the Russian patriarch would have, but not in the war. But not in the war of like, let's say maybe this scale. Maybe the patriarch would have, but I don't think the kings would have, unless they were really, really intent. I think Francis would have held more sway in 1450 than he does nowadays. But yeah, Andrew, you make a good point. The Vatican at least has some idea that it should exercise this power. That even though it is not it's in this world and not of this world, as some people say, but at the same time, you are in this world, so act like you're in it. Try to make things better. You have a role and a duty here.
We could hear you, Caleb. We can't now.
Oh,
Can't hear anything right now.
Nope. We see your lips moving, my friend.
When you first hop back in,
now
we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah,
okay.
We can hear you.
There we go. Sorry, there was my pod track wasn't wanting to work.
And your audio is better. It's less robotic.
Okay, there we go. Good. Okay, well now that I'm back, the Enlightenment. We've kind of been talking about the politics of the Pope no longer kind of being the papacy no longer being like the intermediary or kind of the founders and enforcers of or not enforcers, I guess the root of natural law and not natural law. So my brain is like on the foots today. International law. That's what I'm looking for. We had to talk about how that was kind of like the case beforehand, how it's kind of died down. Let's kind of talk about like why it died down. It's kind of focused on the Enlightenment over here and how what caused the Enlightenment, the effects of the Enlightenment. This is a roundtable on the Enlightenment. So, anybody want to take a side describing the Enlightenment to the audience?
Well, okay. I don't know if I can describe it. I'd probably ask you to, if anyone critically read Kant's essay on this topic, but he wrote for a newspaper, so it's actually readable. I forget what all of his feces are, but essentially critically read it. And if you agree with Kant, you're like, wow, this was a good thing. If you don't agree with Kant, it's like, oh, wow, this is awful, terrible, bad news. Get this away from me. Because basically it's the idea of letting go of all old superstitions. And you see this very much with the French thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau and Denis Diderot, who influenced the French Revolution. I mean, I have a quote from Diderot, who, in case everyone doesn't know, the French Republic specifically, the French monarchy specifically, before the Revolution, very much its influencers, the people who influenced really the lay people, were actually the philosophers, the men of letters. It was called, I think, the Republic of Letters, was this group of philosophers, loosely grouped together. They weren't really friends. Voltaire was not friends with Rousseau by any means, who were really the influencers and who kind of stirred all this shit inadvertently, because Rousseau was not a revolutionary, or at least claimed not to be, and Voltaire certainly was not. Voltaire was a reformer. He very much liked kings. He liked enlightened despots. He didn't even think like most people should read. He thought most people should there should be 40,000 literate people, and they can run the world, or not the world. They can run France, like Plato's Republic. They can be philosopher kings, but everyone else doesn't need to read and they'll be perfectly happy. So Voltaire would be almost reactionary to Rousseau. But Voltaire very much thinks that all absolutes are derived from reason. That, there's all these old superstitions, and Voltaire, he made some kind comments to church every now and then, but at the end of the day, he considered all of this obscurantism, bigotry, and superstition. And that's pretty much what everyone took from him. I mean, his method wasn't really exactly just debating of ideas. His method in dialectic, because he's an excellent writer of fiction, is this ironic commentary of exposing ironies in whatever he's critiquing, even in himself. But because he highlights the ironies in himself, they're fine. He sort of lampshades them and moves on. Rousseau has this problem, and Diderot, the guy who wrote the Encyclopédie, is that how you say it in French? Which basically set the idea for how science was to be conducted from thenceforward, especially in Central to Western Europe. He had this great quote. I don't remember if it was in his encyclopedia or outside of it, but he had this very revealing quote, I should say, which is that reason is for the philosopher what grace is to the Christian. Now, basically, reason is the only thing that can save us. It's this idea. That's why you get the cult of reason. It's not a coincidence. It didn't emerge out of the ether. And Rousseau might be the guy who most confused philosophy ever, maybe, or at least the philosophy in the minds of ordinary people. I mean, before then, I don't think you get the confusion of natural law that libertarians have nowadays, if you don't have Rousseau. And Maritain explains this brilliantly. Because Rousseau, you can kind of say he has a natural law theory. I mean, that's why he has the noble savage, because he confuses two meanings of natural law that Aquinas distinguishes. The first meaning is whatever basically the purpose of a thing is and what is in accordance with its essence. That is, there is certain things that this thing should do, and in irrational nature, such as water, it will just flow downhill because that is its purpose. The purpose of human beings is to worship God and enjoy Him forever and ever. So therefore, that's what we should do. That's what our teleology tends toward. That's what our goal. That's what our flourishing would look like. But we have to choose these things, and there are virtues that help us achieve that, such as faith, hope, charity, courage, wisdom, justice, and I forget the other one. If you ever have a fourth cardinal virtue. And it might be temperance, I believe. And basically what Rousseau does is he confuses these two things and says, okay, man was born a savage, and there was these certain characteristics. There wasn't property, for example. I think he famously says that the first man who set up a fence did the greatest sin of all time. And you can sort of see a Christian arc of history in his. There's the original state of nature, which is blessed and good, and then there's a fall of acquiring certain habits of civilization, and then there is, hopefully, he doesn't have a theory of history per se. Hopefully, there is a salvation and a return to the natural state, and in this natural state would sort of be this democratic city state, which is his idea. This complete idea of equality, liberty, and return to nature, where all are equal and free. And he confuses, and by his confusing these two things, you get something like Rothbard's Robinson Crusoe as the basis of all morality. Well, I shouldn't say morality. Rothbard was a distinguished fan. I'll give him some credit. The basis of all ethics. That is the basis of all permissible actions, at least. And you don't get this idea of Aquinas and Rothbard in agreement as to what natural law is unless you have someone along the way which confuses what natural law is. So even then, you see the influence of Rousseau even in modern libertarians. So that's basically my mini rant on Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot, and beginnings of the French Revolution. But we already talked about the actual French Revolution with that Le Din essay. I believe he goes in depth. Not very much in depth, but enough in depth to get to know that it was not a pretty thing by any stretch of the imagination. But those are my comments. But that's what I have to say for now. You guys can comment away, please.
I think it's been. I want to finish it with you guys at some point, but it's been so enlightening going through Jacques Maritain's Three Reformers, because I think. Yes. And he was writing that in the 50s, I think, is what we decided as the publication day for that. But just so clearly saw the thread of essentially, the development from the Protestant Revolution.
Much earlier, actually, 1928. By the way, continue.
Through 1928. Oh my God, yeah. So in the 20s, he's already sort of figured out like these are the thoughts, these are the guys, these are the ideas that have so infected modern thought. Because I've certainly heard people criticize Rousseau before, rightfully, and yeah. I'm trying to. I think it's a James Lindsay quote. This is we're basically living in Rousseau's world. Like we have culturally just sort of adopted his philosophy in a lot of ways. I will probably rant plenty against Descartes over the course of the rest of this episode, and then seeing the sort of origins in the failures in theology with Luther. That it's those three men and their ideas and the structure around them that really is, if you can understand their thought and what's wrong with their thought, the modern world makes so much sense, and it is really everything since then. What's the idea? I'm going to butcher the quote, but everything I can't. I'm screwed up about how everything after this person is a footnote on philosophy.
Really, I think Alfred Whitehead said this about Plato. The history of Western philosophy is a footnote to Plato.
Yes, exactly. The sort of modern version of that is the philosophy of the last 200 years is a footnote on Luther, Descartes, and Rousseau. As we have there's sort of been tweaks around the edges of those flaws, but it is their thinking in its fullness and made absolutely real that completely explains the current state of the world, I think, to a large degree.
Yeah, very much so. Rousseau chapter is enlightening. I mean, this distinction that Maritain draws, where he says this is what Rousseau gets confused, and then suddenly it clicked why libertarians insist that they are using natural law. It's like, yeah, it's because of Rousseau. Like, that's why. That's literally what, like, I know you guys say Locke, but like, no, Rousseau is easily the most influential guy. Like, the liberals of the 19th century barely read Locke, if I remember correctly. I think Carlsbad posted about this. Like, Locke was not seen as a major figure by the liberals of the 19th century. I mean, if we're talking about French school, Bastiat and the others, even though they might not have liked Rousseau, they would have read Rousseau. They wouldn't have read the Scholastics. Bastiat probably never read Aquinas. Jean-Baptiste probably never read Aquinas. Molinari probably never read Aquinas. But all of those people would have read Rousseau, or at least had his ideas just sort of absorbed by osmosis.
That is one of the interesting things I've been noticing. Is like it's like one guy is influential, and then for the next 100 years or so, his ideas kind of permeate. The people will just say something off the top of their head, like the thing in the Wizard of Saw, like, no, that's why Rousseauian, as it said, you know. They just kind of like the underlying common philosophy people have is Cartesian, and they call it in its nature, you know. I was like, I remember every time I talk like philosophy with anybody, because that's what I talk about a lot. People know that, so sometimes I've been a part of people bring up when I talk philosophy, and they always say the same thing. When I say anything like philosophical, they say, "Well, you can't really know anything except that you exist." And I'm just like, really? It's like, well, what did you learn? I'm like, it's just common sense. I'm like, it's really not. But
it's really not.
It's the exact opposite of common sense. Because common sense allows you sense things, and you sense the same things that other people do.
I can actually go beyond that. You don't know that you exist if you're taking up Descartes' viewpoint. You know that something exists, but for example, you could be something else dreaming that you're you. Mm-hmm. You could be a mask for some other thing. Yeah. You don't need to be you. You know that something exists. And you know that something maybe has changes if you experience time. So maybe there's changes in thought, but maybe that's only just experience in a dream, and no time is actually passing for whatever is dreaming you.
And nowadays, most of the answers I get for people is they say, well, we can always live in a simulations. How do you know that? And it's just like, I'm not engaging with this one. The moment someone brings up simulation theory, I just want to start like stabbing them and say this knife made of ones and zeros. It's so stupid.
I mean, I think this is why the cyberpunk genre, and especially some anime like Ghost in the Shell, which is one of the few animated movies from Japan I've watched I say recently, the last like 4 years now. But it's actually really good. It's only 1 hour and 20, and I think people sympathize or empathize or have some relation to it because because Ghost in the Shell is basically the philosophy of mind that people have. You are a little person controlling this big brain, this big meat machine, and that's what you are. You are not the meat machine. You are the little person in the head of a big meat machine. Mm-hmm. That's what you are. You are a ghost in a shell, a spirit in this empty vessel that you have inhabited for now. And that's why I think cyberpunk, with its idea of the modification of the body, and it's not just that people, it's not exactly that people want that, except the transhumanists, it's that there's this instinctive reaction to it, and yet it is the logical consequence of these ideas given the right technology.
And you mentioned transhumanism. Like if you sort of have a proper understanding of buzzword time holomorphism, and have an understanding of what it is to be human at the level of that Aristotle had, the sort of things that transhumanists will try and espouse just is clearly nonsense. But you talk about, okay, transhumanists want this, but like, the most of the culture today would say, okay, this is a thing that can be done, or a thing that can happen, or this is what a man is, and maybe we should want this, maybe we shouldn't. But there's no appreciation for the idea that you are a body and spirit, that you are there's a unity of those two things, that you aren't a ghost in the shell.
I don't know how many times.
The funny thing is, cyberpunk understands this for the most part, because, for example, even in the eponymous game, tabletop game, Cyberpunk 2077, what you get, for example, every time you modify, you have an additional modification to your body. So, for example, let's say you want something cool like a chainsaw leg for some reason, and like they know it's silly, but flavor text is silly, but that's what they say. Let's say you want that. You actually have like cyber psycho points, I believe that's what it's called. So you get less empathy, and you get more crazy, and you get more and you have a higher chance of going haywire and just like starting killing people, the more modifications there are in your body, the less there is of the original meat, let's say, the original flesh in your body. So, and this also runs throughout cyberpunk fiction and transhumanist fiction, this idea that, you know, we don't know exactly what, but you're missing, like, we don't have the words of the philosopher concept to explain it, but there's something missing. There's something that's not you there anymore, and you're changing it, and you probably shouldn't.
That's interesting. I didn't know about the tabletop game. That's gotta be a cool mechanic though for a tabletop game. It's gotta be like somebody plays cool. Pathfinder. I'm like, I've been asked to run the next like Pathfinder campaign. I might just say, no guys, we're gonna do this one now and just hop into that, because that sounds pretty fun.
Pathfinder is a lot of rules. I remember. If that's like for 3.5e expanded edition, basically.
I play with a guy.
I have the books. It's great if you just want like, oh, they have a fully fleshed out honor system if you want that. They have a fully fleshed out chase system if you want that. Good. I'm not going to use these all simultaneously, but it's good that if I want to do that, it's there. I can just look up the rules.
The DM is a very like engineering kind of guy, so he's very like particular. He's very like all the rules are laid out, everything is defined. And one of the other guys is one of those like he's very autistic. He's a rule lawyer, so they're just like I'll play for 2 hours, and an hour and a half of it where you spend with him debating about what the proper rules for the game are.
I mean, classic. That happens all the time.
It's terrible. It's awful.
Anyway,
I just want to throw fireballs.
Can we get back on topic, please? Can we talk about Cyberpunk 2077?
Yes, back to the topic, Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk or Enlightenment or just Descartes? Because really, this is talking about Descartes. This is talking
about
Descartes.
Okay, I'm going to start my rant now. Because I blame so much of this on Descartes, and again, Meritus sort of my eyes to like, okay, maybe we need to go back and blame Luther for some of it as well. But and I think we talked about this with three reformers in general, but no one would have listened to Descartes if he didn't have something of value to offer. And what you really have is we talk about Enlightenment thinking and the scientific revolution that came along with using the good that was in Descartes' ideas. I mean, it literally transforms the way that science is done, that mathematics is done, the unification of science and mathematics. You have something extremely powerful, and you have this explosion of technology and science and understanding of it, and it's in a lot of ways absolutely due to Descartes and his thinking. But you also have that it's this fundamental flaw at the core of it is this philosophical idealism, is that he is entirely in his head, and in his head he can make a lot of equations, he can do a lot of he can make a lot of systems, and he can make a lot of abstractions and compare unlike things, and again you can develop this incredible machinery to solve problems and get the right answer. And it's revolutionary. And again, we see technology just take off after Descartes because people can start using it. But they forget that it's an abstraction. Descartes forgets it's an abstraction. As you can talk about, okay, I can build the system in my head, and then you think the system, because all that you know that's real is in your head. So okay, the system's in my head. All I know is what's in my head. So the system is real, and you forget that there's a reality outside of you that all these things are pointing to. That ultimately you're talking about a real world, and that's the sort of thing that should take precedence. Is the first thing you know is the real world outside your head, and then you figure out that there's a head that's thinking about it. And you see this, and Rousseau sort of takes this in the field of morality, that he can do evil things, he can be a fundamentally despicable person, but he thinks good. You know, he thinks
yes, he thinks good,
and this makes him a moral individual. And like Bulge mentioned earlier, you see this thread all the way into libertarianism, or as Jeremy on Contra Gentiles likes to call a lot of that thread. He calls it consensualists. It's like, what's the fundamental part of my morality? It's what I want. It's what's in my head. It has nothing to do with if something is good for me or bad for me. If I want it, that's all I can say about it being good. Even something like when you look at on Human Action, when Mises is sort of doing his introduction, he very explicitly says, well, science can't possibly answer if something is good or bad, or you should want something or you shouldn't want something. We know people want things. How do they go get those things? And fair enough, he can make a good economic theory out of that. But he explicitly says, okay, well, the science isn't for knowing what's good or what is real. It's all we have is people's preferences, and that's all we can really judge it on. And if you start with Descartes, if you start in your head, it's impossible to say you shouldn't want that, because that makes reference to there's a good result and a bad result as opposed to just your desires.
Very much so. I mean, there's a lot there about what Descartes did.
Sorry.
I mean, no, but it's true. I mean, I had my mini rant about Voltaire and Rousseau, and the whole, but yeah, there's a lot there about in your head type stuff. I think of the meme living in Ancapistan in your head might be more true than I initially gave it credit for in especially in the in your head part. That might be more true than the Ancapistan part necessarily, or the living in. Like, yeah, you're stuck in your head. Like, please come out to the real world. Like, I don't know. Like, you can still be an anarcho-capitalist and be like, for example, someone like Morlock P or Travis Cochran. Like, he actually just like basically, like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna move to New Hampshire and I'm gonna go to a farmstead and I'm gonna learn how to farm and I'm gonna do all these things. I'm gonna write a book on it. I'm gonna take programming jobs that I can do from a distance. I'm going to move in here. I have my wife, I have friends, I have my dogs, I have the farm, I have sheep, I have pigs. I'm going to do all these stuff. I'm going to help people move to New Hampshire. I'm going to make more laws for what I want, but I'm not going to fucking rant about what DeSantis is doing this week or whatever. Like, I'm just like going to do stuff that's practical to get at what I want or I think is better. Like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And it might just be because Travis is a Catholic, so he just lives in the world. That might be it. I don't know.
Well, and I mean, there's something very the Catholic Church obviously gets this to a large degree, like, and that's why we're so good in aesthetics, is we understand that our interaction with the physical is the way that we know the divine. Like we make beautiful things because it tells us about real beauty and about transcendent beauty. But so one minor aside, like, we like to make fun of libertarians living in Ancapistan in their head. But this is a symptom of, like, we're all guilty of it to some degree. We live in a Cartesian world. Is everyone is guilty of to some degree, and some much more than others. And the direction is certainly getting worse. But everyone's sort of focused on what's in their head and what's not, and what's in the real world. And the other thing I want to point out is this idea of, and I think it's something. There's something wonderful about saying, okay, yep, I'm going to go move to New Hampshire, start my farm, have my wife, have my kids. Is like doing those things and physically participating in the world outside your head forms your thoughts in such a good way.
Yes.
Like it's very hard to have a farmer like who's spent his whole life caring about when it rain or not, plowing fields, making sure his family has enough to eat. It's very hard for them to be living in their head because they are so in touch with the real world. Is their ideas are constantly being beaten up. If they have wrong ideas, reality corrects them very quickly.
Yeah.
If you're a French philosopher, if you're most it is very easy for you to think stupid things and never have reality slap you in the face about how stupid.
Don and Hoffman.
I mean, the most egregious example of the living in your head that we can see nowadays, the most, I think, damning in more ways than one, I mean, literally for the souls of people, is transgenderism. I mean, this idea that sex, what you are, what you physically are, what has always been a physical component of you, as well as a metaphysical and ontological status for what you potentially can do to give birth or to see a woman to give birth. This idea is now, it's a thought in your head. And that's it. It's nothing more.
Yeah.
Which also is really funny because they recognize that can't be true because they always want people to validate them. They sort of accept that that even if it's just a thought in my head, at the very least, the social roles were based on something of a community, and that they need the community to either enforce or encourage or recognize for the most part. That's why they always try to pass as it's, I think some people have made this comment before, but basically cross-dressing is like blackface for women. Like, it looks ridiculous. Right. It looks like genuinely offensive. It looks criminally offensive, and it's really funny because, like, I bet like 80% of people who watch RuPaul's Drag Race or whatever are people like my sister, or women, or usually young women of that age, and maybe that's why they think it's fine, because that's what they were kind of raised watching. But it's very much just a thought in your head, and yet there's this rebellion against it because whenever they do interact with reality, that can't be true. It needs to be more. It's why they have surgeries. I mean, if it was just a thought in your head, why do you need surgery? And it's like, oh, well, the body doesn't correspond to the thought in my head. Okay, why does the body not correspond to the thought in your head? Why is the thought in your head? Why is the body wrong, not your thought, not the thought in your head?
Yeah, and it's this complete inversion of the way our understanding should work. Is we understand the real world first, we understand reality, physical reality around us first, and then we intuit. Okay, I exist. These are things about me, and since they're starting in their head, that's truth for them, and so the reality is what gets shaped around. And it's a recasting of original sin in a way. Is my mind gets to decide reality, and if reality is not does not conform to it, reality is the thing that's at fault.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me of
yeah. Go ahead,
This reminds me of your quote, Eincast. It was was it when you rejected you? I can't remember the exact quote. It was like when you accept Cartesian idealism, your psychology becomes your theology.
Yes,
this really does. This is just spot on. The more I think about that, the more I see it, the more I'm like, yeah, he's spot on with that one.
And again, something Maritain points out is sort of the flaw of Descartes is this angelism. Is you are acting like you're an angel. You're acting like like the thoughts in your head are primary in your thinking, and they're absolutely true. And then reality.
Yeah, you get all the information about the real world are clear and distinct ideas that are already in your head. Much like angels have their knowledge of the world directly from subsistent reality itself. Directly from a kind of direct connection to it, and that's why I think his most fantastic quote that I've had so far, or his most quotable line, is Rousseau's man is Descartes' angel acting like a beast, which is such a good line. Fantastic. Only a Frenchman could write that.
Dude, Jacques Maritain had some like fire quotes. What was one? I said one the other day on the Austro Thomism Twitter, so I can find it real quick.
Yeah, but while you're finding it, I'll say that the only person I've seen who makes Hegel's idea of development of spirit palatable is Scruton, because he casts it in the light of interaction of the world, that you only know yourself. It's sort of a really weird. Scruton has all these very funny, and he doesn't realize he's doing it. He's trying inadvertently to rescue scholastic theology from like the refuse of modern civilization. And it's really, really funny because you'll like, okay, the only way I can define a person is to like go to Aquinas. Like that's the only way I can do it. It's like it's an incarnated thing, and the incarnation cannot be, just run away with. You need to seriously deal with it. So the transgender people can't be right. He talks about this in Sexual Desire as well, and in Human Nature. But when he talks about Hegel's theory of the development of self, it's the interaction of the world and the reflection of yourself that you see in the world whenever you do this thing. It's like, oh, I do this thing. But I'm doing usually after you do this thing and you sort of find out what person you are, and then you can mold yourself, and then this is one of the importances of private property. So I can say this is mine and sort of shape it to mold me as well as I shape it. So I work on my farm. I'm shaping my personality as I'm shaping my farm. I get married. I live with my wife. I have to cohabit. I have to deal with these issues. I have to deal with kids. I have to deal with finances. And as I do that, I'm also molding myself. And it's this is why the dialectic. It's this interaction that this mutual interaction with you and the world and the other subjects in it that sort of always has a growth, not necessarily a growth. It can it can end badly sometimes. We don't want to have a Whig theory of self here, but it's this idea that it's always changing. It's always having something with the interaction of the world. But if you stop the interaction of the world, or deny it at least, and you're gonna be depressed. Basically, you're gonna be suicidal, as we see with certain trends in certain communities.
I found a quote. It was we do not need a truce to serve us. We need a truce that we can serve. Jacques Maritain. Just great quote.
True.
He's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so glad we'll cover him, because there's only like 2 other people on YouTube who cover him. So I'm super glad to be among that group.
I'm intimidated for degrees of knowledge, but it's going to be fantastic.
I found a Portuguese video on him, like a mini documentary, 30 minutes.
I sent a documentary to the group chat the other day, and I'll put it in the description. If anybody wants,
it was on the recommended for that one. Yeah. Nice. It was directly like a Brazilian. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
His story about like him and his wife like wanting to find the truth or kill themselves is beautiful. Like
also just so incredibly French, right?
Yeah, it's the most like married French couple thing I can think of. Either we find the truth together, or suicide pact of the year. It's
so like, romantic.
Wow, okay. It's so like it's so this end point of romantic feeling. Just so this is it romanticism? I don't know how it'd be in English. Romanticism. Romanticism, maybe. Yeah, it certainly feels like something like the poets of the Romantic movement would talk about. This or troubadours in the 13th century or whatever. this idea of like this love. It's very Wagnerian. If you know some of his operas, it's this very like it's very operatic. That's how I would put it. Certainly.
On that point earlier, Ankas, you made a point earlier about how when a system is all inside your head, it kind of makes sense and it's logical when it's all inside your head. But the moment the ignoring of reality of common sense for a system that is like perfectly consistent inside your own head, like the campus in your head situation. Mm-hmm. I have a friend right now who's he's doing a Cold War psychology class where they're trying to say race doesn't exist. And they're using all this like scientific gene evidence and examples of how race doesn't really exist. And he's sending me all these articles and links to everything in the class, and it's just a pure example of like, the teacher literally says
Steve Saylor articles.
The teacher literally says there is no
actually some really good research on this, by the way, but continue.
I'll have to look it out. The teacher literally said there is no distinction of there are no difference between the races. And it's like I put a picture of a black guy and a white guy next to each other. No difference here. This is like this is peak rejection of like consensus. You can visually look at two guys and see the difference, at least in skin color, and like they're denying that. It's asinine.
But like you said, they can develop a system where they define race in such a way as here's our gene map and here's our we do our whatever kind of plotting they use to sort of show genetic distance between things, and there's overlap between this group and this group, and so they make a system, they make definitions within that system, and if they sort of turn the crank and follow to its conclusions, it says okay, these are the same thing. And they've found something that they're not completely devoid of reality. Again, there's some nugget of truth in there in terms of what they're actually finding, but you're completely separated from what it actually means in the real world, and to the common sense, obvious thing that yes, these two people are obviously very distantly related, if at all. Like there is something fundamentally different, and I can categorize these people in this group and these people in this group. That has to do with genealogy, and it's. Again, there's a lot of value to be gained by those tools, but if you don't understand that you're using them, and that's what happens is you forget that it's a system that you're working with. You forget that you think the system is the real world and it's not referring to the real world, and that's why you end up saying preposterous things. You see it in remarkably in physics is probably the worst place you see it. And I know when we were covering Phaser's 5 proofs, a lot of his rebuttals were like, okay, a lot of people have said this about physics. It's not true.
Yes.
A lot of people have said this about physics. It's not true.
The
only way you can have that, because physics works really well. Like physics, is the most precise, accurate, incredibly predictive science that we have and has ever existed in the world, and tells you some amazing things if you understand what it's actually telling you.
Yeah.
But also because you don't digest it properly, people have said incredibly stupid things and think that they're justified by reality because that's true of the system and not necessarily of what the system refers to.
Yeah, there's this great quote that Peter Geach uses, I think in The Virtues. It's from Charles Dickens, whereas he's like talking about insane ethical hypotheticals and stuff like that, and he says, okay, to quote Charles Dickens, but don't you know this isn't so let us not suppose it. And that's basically the put down necessary. It's like, this isn't the case, so let's not suppose it. Moving on. This is like just look at this is why the rationalists, as annoying as they are, people like Yudkowsky, they will have a very good point when they constantly repeat the map is not the territory. Look, there is a territory and you have a mental map of it. The map is not the territory. Don't confuse one for the other. They are very different. Even if your map's really good, you will encounter dragons every now and then if you're not careful, and it's not gonna look good.
We got a comment from Godsmack
Mike
State.
Bastia.
This guy's been here saying a bunch of Quinn's stuff, like statism is a sin. Just Quinn's Mike.
Moving on. But don't you know that isn't so let us not suppose it, Mike. Anyway, moving on.
That quote about the map is not the territory. I mean, we live in a world where everyone thinks the map is the real thing. You made the comment about transgenderism earlier, and it's ubiquitous. Is you think there's something you don't like about the real world because it doesn't conform to your mind, so you try and change the map, right? Like he's like, okay, I wish there was a river here, and you draw it on the map. And I don't think anything could sum up a lot of the sort of identity crises that we see in the world more than that. And it's what you're doing essentially. And if you understand your own nature or the nature of the world, you see how ridiculous these things are.
I've come to this conclusion that like properly understanding human nature, and how to put this, all bad political ideologies stem from a misunderstanding of human nature. Like I'm really beginning to understand like human nature. Like
Yeah,
proper
this is
understanding
why
it. People,
anthropology is so important.
yes,
Philosophical anthropology, which
Absolutely.
is why I like Scruton's book on it. Because even if you don't agree, because his anthropology is kind of just like a very modern idea of aquinas without all the scholastic metaphysics, but he's really good at rebutting everyone else.
yes.
It's like saying, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. You don't
him
need
going
agree
after
for that.
Dawkins. He went after Dawkins and Daniel Dennett in like the first chapter. It was awesome.
Yeah, he goes hard after them. In fact,
Yeah,
like
we're gonna have-
in sexual desire, I think
We're
he
gonna
goes
have fun
hard
covering
after
that
them.
Sunday, covering on human nature.
Human
That's gonna
nature.
be-
But yeah, he goes
great.
hard after Dennett, as Phaser does in Philosophy of Mind, if I
Mhm.
remember correctly, when Grant and Jeremy were talking about it. Phaser goes hard after Dennett. Because you need to get mind, because even if you don't get mind right, you at least need to get the anthropology, how the mind, quote unquote, because it's not really the mind, it's the whole person, interacts with the world. You need to get that part right, at least, to talk about all the other stuff. You maybe don't really need to kind of understand the inner workings of the mind, quote unquote, but you need to get the anthropology right, or else you can really do no science or no nothing that involves societies and people ever.
Absolutely. It's what was I gonna say? I keep having trains of thought and I keep losing them.
It happens.
Yeah, this is not my night. Well, it's been gone for an hour and 10 minutes. I don't think LB is showing up, so I have to reschedule with him again.
Tragic.
He always has good excuses. He's always visiting his family, which is a good excuse to have to skip this.
Yeah, that's good.
We got a question here from Miss Timbit.
Oh, no.
If you were a D&D character, what class, race, class alignment would you be?
Are we going for a realistic answer, like or just like a complete make believe? What would I like?
Let's go. I don't know. Whatever one you want to do. I don't know which one he's asking.
Okay, I think I don't know. I think I guess I'll go for both at the same time. I'll say they're one and the same. Let's say probably gnome, race. I don't know. No, that's race. What class? I don't know. Maybe tinkerer. I don't know. I wouldn't like to go to the ventures. You get hurt in that. I just like to make gnome constructs and play pranks on people every now and then. So, but probably lawful good, because that's as Moldbug says, chaos is evil, order is good. Those are the only two options. So let's go for lawful good.
I'm Gaz. What about you?
I would love to say that I would be lawful good, because I agree with Bulge. Like lawful good is good.
Yeah, basically.
I would probably end up being more chaotic good. Tragically.
Yeah, probably.
Class and race. One of the just to be like avant-garde, to be one of the random races, like the bird people or something like that. Or
I know.
Like a
You're
Kenku
really funny.
or something like that.
You have one really funny thing in lore. Kenku can only say what they hear other people say. So if you hear a word, you can repeat it forever. But they can't. But if they never heard a word, they can't ever say it, even if they can understand it and read it. Which is just a really funny tidbit.
That's basically me. Basically, just reciting what I've heard verbatim.
Yeah, every time there's people talking and you're in a conversation, you just kind of have to repeat what other people said out of context to try and get a point across. Which,
like that.
That's what you should do with Jeremy and Grant, really. Say like a sing-song voice. And I hope they get your point.
just be mocking the entire time, just like I'm just saying back what you said to me, just doing it in a really obnoxious voice.
Perfect race, yeah, for King of Kenku. What about you, Caleb?
I think I'd go dwarf. Probably a dwarf. I don't know. Probably lawful good, magic class of some kind. Probably wizard. Probably lawful good dwarf wizard. That's what I go with.
I'd always go for a sorcerer with a wizard in games, because wizard seems like too much work sometimes.
It is. I'm playing a sorcerer now. I'm playing like a dragonborn sorcerer. It's been a lot of fun.
Nerds.
Yeah. Next comment. Yeah, as I expected.
She has a point.
Okay. Any final points on the Enlightenment or anything we discussed before we wrap this up?
I do have one final quick story about Notre Dame, but
yes, I forgot about that.
Comments on Enlightenment before that. That's the one to close the show. A feel-good story.
Absolutely.
I don't have anything pithy. I could just keep ranting for a while longer, but I don't think anything that could be condensed into a 15-minute soundbite or 15-second soundbite. 15 minutes. Let's
see. I got
15-minute soundbite.
It's
like,
this is the podcast era sound bites.
Yeah, I just
only 15 minutes. What are you doing?
I just can't narrow it down to 15 minutes, guys. Sorry, I have to go for like 2 days.
I think pithy one-liner. The Enlightenment led to Donald Hoffman, and that's why it was a mistake. There we go. That's my argument. Anybody doesn't know, Donald Hoffman was the guy who wrote how evolution hides, the case against reality, how evolution hides the truth from our eyes. No one's read it or look into it because it's fucking retarded. But he's a perfect example of the whole. I divide the system inside my head, and now it makes sense because I did my own math instead I was right. It's another example.
It really is sort of the perfect culmination of exactly what we've been talking about, where you have, like Caleb said, I've built up a system in my mind so it can tell me about the world, ignoring one that system. How did I come up with that system except by referring to the outside world? Like the quote where I think this was one of the interviews he did, like when he was pushing the book, but he was talking about like the simulations that he had run on his computer, and some sophisticated mathematics and some coding that went into it, and the output tells him, okay, I don't experience reality. And doesn't make the connection that like looking at your computer screen and reading the result of the computer screen is interacting with reality. Like it's completely. And I don't know how it doesn't just smack you in the face that clearly I'm something has gone wrong in my thinking when I'm relying on things that I'm seeing directly to tell me that I can't rely on the things that I'm seeing directly.
I was reading some of his book, and at one point, I have a friend who actually, like, my best friend in real life, loves Donald Hoffman, loves that book.
Really?
It's the same. He's the cringiest guy I know. And I asked him, like, how is this not solipsism? How is this not like can't know reality exists? He goes, here's a part in the book where he says, this is not solipsism because I am not a philosopher, and he moves on. And it's like that's not how you answer that kind of question there, Donald.
Yeah, I love this sort of and this is also sort of, and I think it's sort of an evolution of that same sort of Enlightenment thought. And sorry, I suddenly have things I can add. But you have this sort of this bifurcation of the science and philosophy, and and it's starting probably shortly after the Enlightenment, they sort of become two separate things. Instead of science as we understand it now being a growth out of philosophy. So you can sit there and say, it's like, okay, here's all this math I did in this these academic journal articles, and it's like, well, what about this? Ask the philosophers. That's not really, we don't deal with that in the real world. And it's this complete misunderstanding of what the goal of philosophy is and how it should interact with the actual things that you do. And it's like, okay, who cares what the philosophers, they'll tell you what to think of that. Here's what the math says. And it's, again, this falls out of this really this deep confusion about how we know things and what we know and why we know it. That starts with, again, I still blame Descartes primarily.
Yeah. Instead of here's what the math says, I originally heard here's what the mass said.
Which is much better answer.
Which is a better answer. I'm like, yeah, okay, this is what my priest at the homily said. Okay, fair enough. I at least understand that. I understand where you're coming from with that. It's like, okay. I don't know, maybe he got something of physics wrong, but it's like, yeah, there's probably truth in there.
After the 3 reformers, we really should cover that book, or at least cover Donald Hoffman's ideas in Zidwell, because I think that's just the cover why all these people, the 3 reformers, and then cover the result of all of that in Donald Hoffman's philosophy would be.
And here's the thing I'll say, I suspect, again, because again, he did some math does work correctly. There probably is something in his results that is novel and interesting and tells you something about how we interact with the world. It's just not that we don't sense reality.
Yeah.
But he's not able to unpack that because he doesn't know what he knows.
We live in an evolutionary generated simulation, according to him. And it's
what would be an interesting result. I think this was an actual result. We don't observe 90% of the actual stuff surrounding us because we have a narrow ray of focus. And in fact, you can do it right now. You can kind of unfocus your eyes, or you can focus on an object, and then everything else sort of becomes peripheral vision. It loses detail. Your eyes are like a camera lens. Your senses don't capture all of reality. You can't see, maybe some animals can see different colors, or because they can see more of the electromagnetic spectrum, stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah, we don't see all of being. True. Mm-hmm. And also, what would be interesting for cognitive science, okay, what do we see? What do we focus on? What do we usually focus on? How is our sort of body wired to sense and perceive things? How does evolution deal with this? that stuff is interesting. But when you say, yeah, we don't perceive reality, it's like, then evolution is fake, because we wouldn't be here if that's the case. We have no advantage over a blob with no eyes and no legs and no skin and no nothing, because we don't perceive anything. It's like, okay, you're not moving. You don't have, your legs don't work for nothing. The blob is better than you because it at least doesn't say this bullshit.
Yeah, we got some funny comments from Andrew over here. Says we need to do a live question on live questions on libertarians on air, like a Summa
question.
Yeah.
Here
it goes. On question of self-ownership. Objection 1. The Saint Jean-Jacques Rousseau says about power autonomy. Respond to objection 1. And his exit by Rousseau can be dismissed out of hand because he abandoned his 5 kids. Agreed.
I feel like the favorite idea that I've seen from you, Caleb, was when you did like your Zoomer Theologica.
Zoomer Theologica, yeah.
It's amazing. I want to see that developed, because it's just it cracks me up every time.
I still wonder like why a little whole article. Why just do like I just like what I've been doing. I've been taking like parts of the assume I have, and I read it quickly. How do I translate this into slang?
Translate into Zoom.
I just like translate the slang. It's just I feel like what's his name? That Islamic philosopher like translated Aristotle. I feel like him just translating Aquinas to the modern age.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't even say his name. Sarabi. I can't say it. I cannot pronounce Arab names for the life of me. But there's so many bullshit outcomes from the Enlightenment and really from the Protestant Reformation. Revolt. Cannot say Reformation. Revolt. It's just like you see it everywhere. You see.
It's really funny because here I almost said Reformation, but in history class, while we were discussing the Enlightenment and French Revolution, I almost said Revolution like 5 times. And then I just couldn't stop myself.
Then get yourself in trouble.
This is why I can't go to school. I can't keep my mouth shut.
I don't think I would even get in trouble, because like I don't think they would have cared. They mostly questioned it and like say I just say it's more accurate. Like they didn't reform the church because again like 50% of people in Brazil are Catholic. So even like my teacher who's like kind of Catholic but not like, he goes to mass but he doesn't really like know all the theology and stuff like that. But he goes every month or so. So he said like the Counter Reformation was the real Reformation. He's just said this. It's like, it wasn't a counter-reformation. That was what would actually reform the church and actually did stuff in the church. Everything else was outside it, so it doesn't count. He didn't say it was a revolt, though. I don't think he'd go that far. But he just casually say stuff like this that would be kind of weird to like a prot historian. Like they wouldn't say that.
So last thing we need to cover real quick. Sorry, we haven't talked about how the Enlightenment led to boasting about being a cuckold on Twitter.
That's right. Okay, so the Enlightenment is gay, as we all know, and being a cuck is also gay. So we could say that the Enlightenment created cucks. I think that's a fair. It also created veganism. I'm going to argue.
I mean, it's also the exploration of hedonism. There are no rules in nature, stuff like that. Everything is permissible.
So
it goes back to this. What's in your head is, if I want to live in I want to be in a polyamorous relationship, or this person would be happy, thinks they would be happier if they were, dating me and this other person and their cat. Like it's that becomes the priority, the most important thing, not actually, what is the nature of human beings? How do they procreate? How do they, live happily? What forms fulfilling relationships? It becomes completely subjective. As I can decide what makes me happy, which is a really dumb idea that is incredibly pervasive.
So this is why we had to bring it up. Anybody who doesn't know, Anthony Samuroff tweeted out, "I'm Polly, and my beautiful girlfriend, who is the love of my life, has another boyfriend. Ask me anything." And he is getting dragged to hell right now. I wish he was being dragged upward and away from this, nonsense, but it is just the fact that he not only would do this, but then brag about it on Twitter.
I think it might be a troll, because I think last time I heard him speak, he said he didn't have a girlfriend, but maybe he was poly back then too.
Who is this person, by the way? Because I follow people that follow him, but I
remember him writing some interesting stuff on psychology and economics, because he works. I don't know if he works at the Mises Institute, but he's published stuff there, which is interesting stuff. He's like published like good stuff against like explaining what Marx meant and why it's wrong, and then going deep into like the theories of history between Marx and Mises and comparing the two. So he's actually a good writer. That's how I know him.
I believe I heard he used to be like a right wing, like closed borders libertarian guy, but he got really woke recently. Guess he got a liberal girlfriend and just dragged him out of it. But it's
the conclusion we
classic
can come
Adam
to
and Eve story.
This is what women are evil and should be avoided at all costs.
Absolutely. Virginity procured. Not procured. What's the word I'm looking for? Protected.
Secured.
My brain is not lined up. Secured. That's the word. Yeah, no, it's just. It's so cringe. Everything is so cringe nowadays. I don't like. I have a friend texting me. He's like, hey, what's your response? And he sent me like this articles for his class. So I'm like, it's cringe, gay, and zogged. I'm not engaging.
It's like, here, I have this Nick Land essay on Heidegger and Trackle. I think you should read it. And just like send like, I don't know, CCRU meltdown stuff.
I just want him to walk in and say the N-word.
We'll have a heart attack.
That was my advice. Nobody say no when someone in class brings up African American, just say, you mean that, just do that number and leave. Okay, I need to pass
this is why you can't go to school, Caleb. You're not welcome there anymore.
I've been told 4 times this past 2 weeks I need to go to college to study philosophy, and I said no. I can't go somewhere where I know everyone is wrong. I have to go somewhere where people are right.
Yeah, that's the dilemma. I can't go to this place. They're wrong.
Exactly. I have to go somewhere where they're correct. The Catholic school. I'm not going to sit there and I flipped out on this. My friend, the same friend, his professor asked the question to the class, what makes a human? And he said reason, and she mocked him wrong. Which I hate the fact that you can just like a teacher can just mock like a philosophical question like that wrong out of hand. I hate the idea already. But her answer was a soul is what makes someone a human, because not everyone can reason. And it's like, what kind of soul? I mean,
a vegetative soul?
Like a rational soul, maybe? And like it's just like I read about how she was Protestant. Like Protestants don't know what a soul is. Like this is my biggest like I was
it's
in
the Ghost in the Shell. It's literally the Ghost in the Shell. The Protestant view of the soul is the Ghost in the Shell, and I hate it.
Yes, dude, I don't know how many times I've heard in my old church, the body sins, the soul does not sin. I'm like, well, why seek forgiveness then? Like, how does this work? Like, how does any of that make any sense? Like, it's so retarded, and it's like it just went a little quiet, a little air start. It would be a bit so much for the better for it. It's retarded.
Yeah, but so Spinoza, despite getting a lot of stuff wrong, I think, despite being very, very smart, he actually kind of gets the mind-body thing right because he's read some Aristotle. When he says, the mind is the idea of the body and the body is the reality of the mind. They're like, that's what they are. And then you can sort of see, the mind, the soul is the form of the body is the material of the soul, and it's all together in one thing. And they're not really separate. They're just like maybe different ways of looking at the same thing, but they're really one thing. I mean, you can sort of abstract it and just look at the rationality of the person, not their animality or whatever, but they're together. So Spinoza is more correct than Protestants in this. And they should feel bad.
They should feel bad. They should feel really bad. Well, we've gone for an hour and a half. If LB was a hop in right now, we'd have to go for another hour. So I want to end this before.
So we got to get away before he gets here.
I want to end this before he gets in because I don't want to go another hour. I have work tomorrow. Okay. Final. Let's do that Notre Dame story, and then we'll do plugs.
Sure. So, I'm reading from the Guardian here. So how medieval carpenters are rebuilding Notre Dame. So here in a forest clearing in northern Burgundy, history is being remade to the sound of chisel against stone and axe against wood, as 23rd century artisans relearn and perfect long-forgotten medieval skills. Why or how they're doing this is the Guédelon project was dreamed up as an exercise in experimental archaeology 25 years ago. Instead of digging down, it has been built upward, using only the tools and methods available in the Middle Ages and, wherever possible, locally sourced material. Now, in an unforeseen twist of fate, Guédelon is playing a vital role in restoring the structure and soul of Notre Dame Cathedral. So basically, the idea is that no one really, when the fire happened in 2019, like the way the cathedral was built, specifically the roof beams that caught fire, and it was actually this really complex structure with techniques that were incredibly advanced for the time, and that now that we just use industrially produced wood and can sort of use modern tools, no one knew how to, or no one thought, or everyone thought no one knew how to actually imitate it. But then the Guédelon project kind of spoke up and said, actually, our guys know how to do this. And we've trained a lot of people who know how to do this. So a number of the bidding companies from the Notre Dame work have already engaged carpenters trained at Guédelon, and more are expected to beat a path to the Burgundy clearing 200 kilometers down the Autoroute du Soleil from Paris. So more carpenters are going there to train. And I believe it's actually a solely private enterprise. They occasionally work with like state research projects for archaeology, but they are a private enterprise in itself. So this is actually a win for the free market libertarians here. They could sort of say, yeah, fuck you. The state would do this. Private enterprise, hell yeah. And let's see. So basically their argument by guys at Guédelon, which some of them have there's a philosopher who turned carpenter working there, and they're also getting the blacksmith there to get the access to chop down the trees and actually saw it correctly, because they're not using a sawmill. They refuse to do it, all the guys at Guédelon. And the idea is that it's not the way we're doing this is not just nostalgia. If Notre Dame roof lasted 800 years, it is because of the way they did their wood. There is no heart in sawmill wood, is what he said. Yeah, there's even a picture of the blacksmith here. Let's see. Now, after 25 years, we're the only ones who can understand and are able to do what has to be done, and they discover we have not sold our soul to the devil. Our people will be working on Notre Dame one way or another, but why would we want to go to Paris? We will continue our 13th century work here. Let's see. So this is the Florian Ranucci, the Guédelon site manager and philosopher turned master mason, has already been asked to oversee training of artisans expected to work in Notre Dame. All we heard over and again after Notre Dame burned was that it was not possible to reconstruct the roof as before. There was no wood, no savoir-faire. It was an argument used by those who wanted to modernize. We show that it can be done, and we know how to do it. So, okay, basically they can do it, but the one problem they have is that Macron promised to reopen Notre Dame by 2024, and the guys at Guédelon are saying, that's insane. Give us a couple of years. But, if you're going to rush it, you're going to do it wrong. You're going to try to modernize it. You're going to try to change it. Do not do that. I mean, as you see, this guy just openly said we did not sell our soul to the devil. So I feel like maybe this might be a group of there might be a couple of religious tendency in the group that certainly runs the operation, which is very interesting. But that's the feel-good story that I have of Notre Dame.
Story. That is an awesome story. I honestly, the whole Notre Dame rebuilding story has been full of amazing situations. Ubisoft, because they had mapped Notre Dame a whole lot for the game Assassin's Creed Unity. They had the plan. They had to use the plans from the video game to help rebuild some of it. It's just
they have the most accurate 3D rendering of Notre Dame plans possible, and they can use those plans for reconstruction. That's probably what the guys at Guédelon are going to use. So that's a very beautiful, very beautiful harmony of modern and ancient.
I love it. This is
very auspicious church. This really feels like a heavy-handed metaphor, by the way. Yeah. Rebuilding Notre Dame with both old and new methods really feels like a very heavy-handed metaphor for what the church is going through.
We are very pro Notre Dame over here, because look at the background on this podcast. Look at the profile pic for the podcast.
I've been to Notre Dame before. It was beautiful, but I was an agnostic back then, unfortunately, so I didn't really appreciate it. But it was, jaw-dropping.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building. I need to go. I need to go to Europe. I've never been out of America, and I really gotta get to Europe.
I mean, America's huge.
Yeah. I've only been in 6 states, so it's even smaller.
Still.
Okay, well, let's do some plugs. Bokov, plugs.
Well, I'm at available username on Twitter. I write for Austro Thomism. I've only written 2 articles so far. Well, I'm working on several further. I'm seeing which one is worth continuing, which one is maybe outdated or not worth continuing because it's not fun anymore. Several ones in the works. I don't know which one will actually make it to the light of day, but that's what I have so far. I'm not really anywhere else at the moment.
Got it. I'm Kath. What about you?
At Einkath on Twitter, anarchocatholic.substack.com. Also contributing to the new and improved Austro Thomism website. Similar to Bulge, I've got a bunch of things that are sort of half written. They will turn into articles. I need I need a more aggressive editor and Caleb to just like smack me occasionally and say, "Hey, write something." So it's Caleb's fault that I'm not writing enough. Is what I'm trying to say here.
I need to read more. You need to write more.
I need to write more.
It's a
My main
vicious
problem
cycle.
is, like,
You start reading all of my writing and never actually get
I just need to actually like sit down and just like for an hour just write random stuff, see if it's worth and pursue instead of writing a little bit. And then like, I don't know. That's basically my method so far, and I need to just like get time, sit down, write, see if it's good.
I'll start writing like a chapter for the book I'm writing, and I'll write like one paragraph. I gotta research that a little bit more, and I'll go spend like 2 months reading a book, then never come back. Then I go back to like, okay, write one more paragraph.
I want to read like 5 books on metaphysics before I comment on this. I don't know if I want to.
Yes. Okay, so Austro Thomism has a Patreon. You can I'll put a link in the description after the stream. Support the Patreon. You get access to the Discord where you can ask us questions, hang out with us in Discord. That'd be fun. We're going to figure out some more bonuses later on. We got a lot of things in the work. We're going to take Austro Thomism, make it bigger. We're going to incorporate more stuff going forward. It's going to be amazing.
How do we get those cool hats?
Once I figure out how to actually add a store page to the website, I will start selling the hats and the Tank Top Thomism t-shirts and the hoodies I'm making. So we're gonna. I gotta figure out how to. Once I add the store page, we're good to go. I might just say screw it and make an Etsy page and just do it that way. But so we got that going on. This week we have just let's see. Also, Thomism tonight Roundtable is done. Tomorrow I have Jay coming on for Carl Smith's Concept of Political. Then I have Tommy coming on for an episode of Blaming Like I'm 5 ESG. And then Belcow comes on again Sunday for on book on human nature.
Yep.
Then Paul Faraday comes on for an episode on American patriotism, which I'm super excited for that one.
Mm-hmm.
And sometime in October, Eincast and I are going to cover, I believe, hopefully, metaphysics, scholastic introduction. No, what's it called? Introduction to Scholastic Metaphysics by Ed Fazer.
Yep. Good book.
And then Belcow and I are going to start the Sexual Desire from Roger Scruton.
I probably should write that. I should actually just write like a summary of the chapters. Because you can sort of group it very easily.
Yes, you
should do that. There's like 5 articles you can write to like sum up the basic ideas of each chapter of like each part.
It's a phenomenal book. Everyone needs to go read that one. Preparation for
it's really good. It's really good.
And then we got The Degrees of Knowledge was Eincast by Mariton, Sexual Desire by Screwer with Belkov, and then Popular Liberty and I are going to cover Leftism by Laden. Each of these would be a 5-episode series for each book because they're massive books. We're going to take time to dive deep into each of the ideas, do 4 chapters an episode, and we're going to do really focus on these books. It's going to be really fun. Just if there's anything else going on in the works to cover in the future. I think that's
already a lot.
Yeah, so I think that's everything that's going on. Everything that's planned. I don't have any. I don't plan to cover any more books besides what's listed for the rest of the year. This is the plan for the rest of the year. There's nothing new. Come 2023, got a lot of great ideas. Make sure you guys subscribe. Everything's on Austro Thomism now. My show, Austro Thomism. If Bokov and Ann want to do anything, they'll cover things. Popular Liberty wants to. He's going to start doing stuff over here, Austro Thomism as well. We're going to have a lot more stuff coming out, a lot of great content. Make sure you subscribe, hit the Patreon, follow us on Twitter at Austro-Thomism on Twitter. Website is austro-thomism.com. We are on all the podcasters. You can find us anywhere. We got a lot of great stuff coming out, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. So make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff. I think that's it. Anyone have any final words?
Rousseau and Voltaire were, bastards. And disasters for the human race. That's it. And also, I'll take a quote from Nietzsche. Kanto, the catastrophic spider, not for as Nietzsche thought. I think Fazer talks about this. Not for as Nietzsche thought, sneaking in Christian morality into the world, but sneaking in modern morality into Christian thinking. I'll say that. That's what I'll end on.
I like it.
Kanto, catastrophic spider.
That's a good one. Eincast, any final thoughts? Final words?
Follow the blessed Shia LaBeouf and join the church.
Yeah.
Amen.
Watch the Padre Pio movie. Give them money. Watch it in cinemas. Buy it. I don't care.
Buy 4 tickets for only one person. That movie needs to blow up. Okay, well, everyone, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good night.